Today we're finally reviewing the Manba 1, a $70 Hall Effect wireless Switch and PC controller with a magnetized removable faceplate that serves no purpose, 4 remappable rear buttons that can be finicky to hit, and a couple of design choices that leave me scratching my head and my rump. On the flip side of the token, it includes a charging cradle, magnetic Hall Effect thumbsticks with a couple of swappable options, 4 remappable rear buttons, and a big ass screen.
Who wants to see me do a big ass stunt?
That's $70. That is impressive, and this was highly requested to be reviewed on the channel. That review is now. Without further ado, let's get it.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers, and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist.
Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
A quick disclaimer to my audience, the Stallions and Stallionettes. This controller was sent for review, but this is going to be an honest, comprehensive review. I haven't been paid or told to say anything about it, so if there's any cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement, you're gonna hear about it. So these companies make better products over time. Some of the key notable features that make the Manba 1 a very interesting controller, or at least very highly requested on the channel. The first one is going to be a 2-inch display, which generally displays screens on a controller is an absolute waste of space, improper allocation of build costs, because they're very unnecessary. No matter how bright, vibrant, beautiful the display looks, you can do the same settings by holding down a combination of buttons. And thus far, the only controller that I thought the screen really added something was the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, and that's because you can use third-party apps such as Ring security alerts, and even as the Techni mentioned in his review, medical alerts from a diabetes monitor. That's freaking sick. Not having diabetes, that's not cool, but being able to get notifications on your controller screen. But the fact that this is a $70 controller with a 2-inch display that actually looks very bright and vibrant, it's not mentioned if it's LCD or OLED. You can guarantee if it's not mentioned, it's not OLED. That's a good catchphrase or slogan. If it ain't mentioned, it ain't OLED. There's no way you could pack a 2-inch OLED screen into the $70 controller. The build costs just don't make sense. But that doesn't really matter because the screen does look very good. More on it later as I give you a full tour, walkthrough, or demo as to what you can do, as there is no app or software needed. So that section of the review will be skipped because it doesn't exist and instead replaced with the onboard control with that screen. And controller manufacturers always have some marketing hoopla or bullschlaga that just doesn't make sense. You can set the controller directly through the screen visualization, immersing you in the game world.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
I've tasted other Cocos. This is the best.
Having a screen that requires you to look down at your controller, thus looking off of the TV or monitor that you're playing on, actually removes you from immersion. So maybe change this to something more realistic, like for easy customization. And this is a fun one that our knees are starting to get raw over here because we're always having a knee slapping good time whenever we see this on my channel. Multi-platform support. The only time that is mentioned by manufacturers is when it's actually only one console, usually Nintendo Switch. And then of course it's going to work on PC because you can push driver support for fucking anything. It's really bragging about nothing. It's being like multi-platform support. It's one console, but with the use of converters or adapters, there's a high possibility, Cheech and Chong high possibility, that you can get this bad boy working on Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. We of course will be testing it as we do that in every controller review on this channel. Chanel number 7. Welcome to GamerHeaven. There is an 1800 milliamp hour battery. We'll talk about the charge times and playtime later. This comes with a charging station, which I thought was absolutely fucking wild. That a $70 controller with a 2-inch display, Hall Effect magnetic zibbity dibbities, 6-axis gyro, remappable rear buttons, and Hall triggers that happen to have a trigger lock or stop system, can also contain a charging dock, which by the way, FlyDigi likes to charge $25 for theirs, which looks and feels like a cheap piece of poop. More marketing hoopla and just head scratching. When you read this, you're thinking to yourself, who typed this? Was it somebody with a pulse who has actually used a controller before? Check this out. First of all, this entire blurb should be at the top because it's a summary of all the other features. It starts out talking about the screen, which has its entire breakout right here. So this should go to the top. This can come down here. That's not what I'm busting balls about over here. It's this right here. The 4 back button keys support macro, which we'll talk about during the rear button section. And you can activate the set character's ultimate move with 1 click. So you can engage your ultimate ability, your final form.
What did you say his power level is?
With 1 button.
It's over 9,000!
What are you talking about, Manba?
Now it's
going for 9.
And we are, of course, saying no to stick drift. Absolutely not. Not here, not, well, I was going to say not ever, but you can get stick drift with Hall Effect thumbstick modules. It is much less likely because you have to have a recentering spring lose tension on you and it'll start to walk the yard like a dog off the leash, but you can. These manufacturers, of course, will tell you absolutely not. You're not going to buy the controller if I tell you it's drift resistant or less likely to get stick drift. But if I fucking tell you the $70 gamepad will never get drift on you, you are going to gobble that sucker up with a fat spoon.
Unless you're a GamerHeaven subscriber and understand that potentiometer thumbsticks that have been on the market for 2.5 decades, actually a little bit longer than that, have their pros and their place in the controller world as well, and continue to be the most common thumbsticks on the market. This comes from somebody that was saying that Hall Effect is going to be the future, is and will be the path we walk on as controller players, and it is, but it's been a sloppy road thus far. We've been rolling our ankles like a drunken prom date. We're a baby doe fresh out of the womb with those skinny little stick legs. The legs that the market's been standing on with Hall Effects have been snapping underneath them and crumpling. Anyway, little rant there about how I think Hall Effect is just kind of a marketing gimmick thus far, but when implemented correctly, it is fantastic. And I thought this went pretty hard in the paint delivery area around the world.
Prestige worldwide. Why? Prestige worldwide.
And one thing I really love to see, because it raises a huge cause for concern, is there's a big price discrepancy between the manufacturer's website and a third-party vendor, in this case Amazon, but luckily they are both 70 bones for the black and white variant, which currently only the white variant is in stock with Prime 2-day shipping. This black one over here, not so much. You don't even have the clear faceplate that shows the vibration modules in there. I mean, you gotta go with the white, brother or sister. As for the packaging and included accessories, I was a little bit concerned. This plastic shell that works as kind of a sneeze guard has a lot of little micro scratches, and the cardboard was a little bit dented on the side. The outer box that this came in was also quite blown out, but what really counts is the controller, and she looks fine. If you want to pause the box to read some of the key features, you may do so now. This is, of course, for Windows 10 and 11 PCs, Nintendo Switch, Bluetooth devices, and they mentioned Steam Deck, which means Linux PCs. Plastic tray has a little spot of foam for stability. You have a very short 1-foot rubber USB-C cable, which is just used for charging. If you do want to go wired, you can bring your own, something a little bit longer, maybe color-coded to match your theme or setup. I don't know what you kids do. No dust covers, no Velcro tieback. In the plastic bag, you are going to have your swappable thumbstick caps, which we'll talk about during the thumbstick section, your instruction manual, pamphlet, or brochure. Presentation of the controller is actually pretty sweet. You do have a peely boy on the LCD screen, and around backside, you do have a little protective sheet for those rear buttons, which I thought was really nice. These 3 pogo pins are going to make contact with the 3 metal pads in the back. Drops in quite easily. Nice. The instruction manual is actually pretty sweet. You do have a QR code if you prefer a soft document that you can pinch and zoom on your phone, but this has partial color, yellow, as that is their theme color. We see this with a lot of brands only highlighting lime green or purple, but everything else in the manual is black and white, little color pop to remind you about their branding. And around backside, you do have the Chinese characters, English on this side. Little plug for the socials right there. As for the charging dock, it doesn't feel like a brick, not super solid and durable, but also doesn't feel like a cheap, flimsy piece of shit. You do have this little seam where these 2 pieces meet, and an old LED light, status indicator light, a couple of rubberized feet, no slip johns on the bottom, and then you have this tray, which doesn't drop down into the Rancor pit, but actually a little 2.4 gigahertz dong, which has a little cutout for your finger, so you can get super easy, just falls out, spills out onto the desk. No dust cover, but you don't really need it because this entire charging dock or cradle works as a dust cover for this dongle. It's a dongle. It doesn't feel the best. Sick little pattern on there. Let me catch the light just right so the camera does its job. It shows the sweet, decadent, succulent viewer what the fudge I'm looking at, which is these cool little triangle joints. As for the cosmetics or appearance, I do believe that the white version goes so much harder in the paint, which is shocking because that is the identical price at $70. The reason I say this version is so much cooler is you do have that clear faceplate, which shows the vibration modules in there. Sure enough, you'll see them spinning up when they're working. In addition to that, you do get more from the RGB lighting, which I'm going to turn on in just a sec, but you also get kind of a gradient that starts as a light silver and then makes its way up to white, which looks super sick. But what really throws a monkey wrench in the cogs is going to be this section down here with this very cheap silver metallic painted plastic piece, which we're going to talk about during the comfort section as well. That's the main detriment, isn't that it looks like a cheap piece of crap, and we'll knock a point off during the cosmetics, but what it does for comfort. Overall, I think the white version looks pretty gosh darn sick. Let's turn the screen and the RGB on, shall we? Yeah, honestly, I think the lighting looks pretty gosh darn sick because RGB can be super just detrimental, tacky. The way this bleeds through looks so cool. The back I actually like quite a bit, other than the brushed brushed silver triggers and bumpers I don't really think go well with the white. I think it's the particular silver paint that they went with. It just looks like painted plastic. It doesn't look like, oh, these could be metal, and they're definitely not actual metal like the Microsoft Elite 2. Anywho, you have this little section over here, which at first I thought looked a little bit cheap, but upon further analysis, if you shall, I actually like this little section, and I also like that the regulatory information is in this QR code, also very inconspicuous, not some huge sticker on the back fudging up the looks. A little bit of branding with Manba on the top, and then some cheap smoked plastic up here for the top of the screen. Overall, I'm gonna give the looks a 6 out of 10. It's a mixed sack. I mean, certain things look fantastic, like these vibration modules exposed, the RGB light if you go with this white version, but then you got that silver trim down here, which, somebody get fired, please. 6.5 out of 10, it's fair? Said it like more of a question. That's what it is, 6.5 out of 10. As for the ergonomics or comfort, let me turn this bad boy off to save a little bit of juice. It's not very comfortable at all because the ergonomic shape or shell design is very similar to an Xbox One or Series controller. That's great, but what's not great is this little plastic trim piece down here, which sticks way further off the bottom of the controller, and you absolutely feel that. If you have medium to larger size hands, that's exactly where they're gonna wrap around, and you're constantly feeling this little lip on your finger, which does not feel good. It's not sharp, you're not gonna cut yourself, but it sure as shit is not as comfortable as a normal controller. There's no rubber grips back here, which is fine, actually good for durability, but you don't really get much in the means of grip. And the rear buttons, I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit, are practically unusable for these top two buttons. You'd have to have your hand in there like that, which is physically impossible. See what I mean? I'm only able to hit those bottom buttons. I'd have to slide it a weird way to hit these top Johnny Be Goods. But yeah, ergonomics and comfort, a 3 out of 10 for me. This is not comfortable at all. As for the perceived build quality, the Manba 1 absolutely feels like a toy. Every part, every component comes together in an overall package, which feels like a very cheap controller. And some cost-cutting measures simply had to be made. There's a 2-inch screen, magnetic Hall effect thumbstick modules, 4 remappable rear buttons, an included charging cradle, which actually feels better than other companies which charge for such a thing. Hall effect triggers with a little stopper lock system. Hello, can you engage? Whoa, there we go. Jesus, we'll talk about those later. They suck, but they're there. And that's a trend here. They're there, but they suck. And that applies to a lot of the components, which we're going to break down individually. The Dpad, the thumbsticks, the face buttons. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing this controller. There are some things I really do like. I sounded like I was from Michigan or something. Bashing this controller. I'm not bashing this controller. There's just some things I've got to mention to my audience. This is a $70 controller, so it is a rather budget-oriented entry-level pad. It feels like an absolute toy, and also an uncomfortable toy because of this silver section. Let me show you what's a little more comfortable than this controller. An actual toy from Fisher-Price, which I bought for $7 for a April Fool's video 2 years ago. Check that out. 36-month-year-olds. Why are you going off months here? Billy's 86 months old, still breastfeeding. As for the D-pad or direction buttons, it's not nearly as much as an offender as I originally thought, as this is actually somewhat usable if you're somebody that prefers a D-pad where you can simply rest your thumb in the center and then move around like this, and you can actually hit all 8 gates or directions just by wiggling your thumb around in the center. You actually don't need to press over here or over here. No sir, no ma'am. You just hold your thumb right there in the center and then roll it around. It's an 8-way micro switch in there, which is good, but it is much too light, so you get what's either false actuations or it just all kind of blends together in a big bowl of input soup. Very floaty, if you will, which I guess could be good and practical and usable if that's what you prefer. If you want to be able to rest your finger in the middle of the D-pad and do this, it'll do that. I don't like that because it doesn't feel very precise. I can't slip into each one of the gates very accurately, so if I'm playing a fighting game where I need to be able to hit down right or up left or whatever, that's not gonna, no. 5 out of 10 though, because there are gamers that prefer a D-pad like that. And the plastics used don't feel terrible. It's also not very loud either. As for the face or action buttons, this is one of the primary reasons that had me deem this toyish during the build quality section. These feel horrendous. The plastics used, the sound produced, and most importantly, the feeling when you actuate them. It's mushy like a membrane switch, which you would expect because there's a rubber plunger mechanism under there, but it's also hard to press. It requires a lot more force or resistance than almost any other button. One little piece of praise, there's actually very little side-to-side wiggle, which is very common in almost any other controller, so that's cool. Size and spacing feel very similar to a stock Xbox controller. Also, they have that rounded shape, which y'all know I'm not a fan of. I like them flatter buttons. The face or action buttons, I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 4 out of 10. They offend me a slight bit.
As for this accessory button suite, it's not very sweet. Look how fucking deep these buttons are. Look how far they stick off of this little metallic trim piece. Also, look at that side-to-side player wiggle. It's like a dentist getting ready to wiggle and pull a tooth. Keep in mind, nothing is happening. You do actually need to turn the controller on from this little on-off switch in the back, which I do like. It's very small, inconspicuous, and feels quite taut. This section with the USB-C port at the top looks and feels incredibly cheap. Be careful when you're charging this. Just pull the charger straight out. Don't pull it at an angle. This thing might shatter on you. The primary focus of these two buttons is to control the screen, which I'm going to give you a full tour in a little bit. But this is your actual gameplay buttons. Pause and select, or pause and options, whatever you want to call it, which I would like if they were up here. But, you know, you got to kind of dislocate your thumb to pause the game. No big deal. I'm going to loop the removable faceplate in with the accessory suite because I didn't know where else to put it. Just like Manba 1 didn't really know what they were doing or why they implemented this feature in the first place, because you can remove the thumbsticks without taking off the faceplate. All you need to do is pop them off. They're held on with friction. Other than wanting to maybe paint this a different color, pop it off and spray paint it, there really is no reason to have this feature, this modular removable faceplate. Don't get me wrong, it looks cool, but there's no functional purpose to this. There it goes. You have to put it on just right, and also getting it off is harder than snapping it back on. I can't really do it one-handed. I'm gonna give the accessory button suite a 5 out of 10. The thumbsticks are Hall effects, so they should be virtually stick drift proof for you. You do have a couple of swappable options. The pre-installed Johns are these short, pretty much what you're used to with a stock controller. Concave thumbsticks, very reminiscent of the Xbox shape, although a little bit different around the outside. Not saying different as in better, but just different than what you're used to. You do also have 2 high rises, which I do like. These aren't really mid-rise, they are a proper high rise. And the height and grip is to the point to where I wouldn't even need a KontrolFreek or snap-on cap, although if you prefer them, we're going to test the compatibility right now. You do want to remove the removable caps if that is an option, if your controller has them, to not put undue pressure on your thumbstick modules. Although these are Hall effect, you just still don't want to punish them like that. PS4 and 5 caps are loose and wiggly. You can actually pinch and twist them, which isn't optimal. Switch Pro caps stay on, but are still a little bit loose and wiggly. You can pinch and twist as well. However, the Xbox One and Series caps are perfect. We're in the back of the white panel van of Chester, the gamepad tester, hooked up with the Manba 1. It's not turned on, but I am. So let's turn the controller on as well. Let's also turn on the RGB light that's supposed to be behind that TV. I've had that TV for 9 or 10 years. Repurposed it as a third monitor for the game room. You don't give a shit. But I'm passing time while we get this controller hooked up. So the screen is displaying that I am connected and I am an X input with a full tap of battery. Sick logo there. The Manba with the red devil eyes.
With their eyes as red as the devil's dick.
It's an Xbox controller. It has a perfect resting value of 0.00002. Also freakishly responsive. At first it looked like there was an inner dead zone, but there isn't. I guess I was just being a little bit choppy with my thumbs. But if you feather ever so slightly away from neutral, that is being registered. It's not jumping from here to here. We've seen it in the past. That's called an inner dead zone, boys. Outer dead zone being where you cannot reach 100%, hitting the outside of your thumbstick gates, which, by the way, I forgot to mention over there, they don't have anti-friction rings, but they glide so fucking smooth. This is some of the slickest plastic on this faceplate. Let's run a circularity test, shall we? Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, God, you're sweet looking and sweet tasting as well. Let's do another one. The result's the same here. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. God, the bumpers fully fall in line with my disclaimer earlier in the build section quality that this is very toyish. These sound very hollow, clacky, tinny, and also don't feel the best. Actuating them happens easy with the meat of your finger, but God forbid if you try and use the tip of your finger up here, it's extremely difficult because of the swivel or hinge mechanism that it's on. The stippling doesn't feel great. It does provide a little bit of grip, but just doesn't feel the best on your fingertips. I think the worst offender here is the sound though. Check this out. Sound pretty loud and hollow for mechanical bumpers in my opinion. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 4 out of 10. As for the trigs, you do have an on-off trigger lock or stop system. I will say when it is disengaged, you don't have much travel. So if you're picking this up for racing games, you're not gonna be really modulating the throttle and brake too hell of a lot, too much. And also I hate the on-off system. It's very hard to engage and disengage. It's like a child safety system. You have to push it in and then down. As with any other system, you can be in gameplay, you pick up a gun you want the trigger locks on for, boom, you snap them on. This one, you need to like press into the shell and then down. It's super weird to defeat the safety, so to speak, to engage it. They're terrible. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 2 out of 10. I don't know what would warrant a 1 star here. I'm gonna give you a little tour of the screen, which they call
limitless customization. These marketing teams just can't be stopped. They need to chill the fuck out, but is it limitless? There's like 4 pieces of customization. It's your vibration, your screen brightness, button binding, which would be faster and more efficient, not having to dig through the screen, just holding down a combination of buttons. Vibration, that is actually beneficial to adjust on the fly. Joystick modes, very beneficial to have on the fly. Hey man, what are you squeaking for? I just filled you up. What a piece of shit. Once she's booted up, hold down the home button for 3 seconds. As you can see, this is pretty damn bright. I have 4 lights facing this controller, and the screen is still letting us know what's going on. So it's pretty unintuitive. You can navigate with the D-pad and with the analog sticks, but you would think this is select and this is go back, as it is with almost any other screen, but nah. Start is your select and back is your go back. So we're gonna go into mode, which is your modes of connectivity. Switch, iOS, and Android are all Bluetooth. The speeds we're gonna test on the PC are the same in all 3 of those modes. So you do have 4 profiles, technically 3, but one's a default, which you cannot customize. As you can see, everything's grayed out. So we're gonna start with setting 1 over here. In order to tweak the settings, you're gonna come over with the D-pad or the analog stick. If you hit start, nothing happens. You need to navigate yourself over here like this. This is the button bindings. That's so stupid. And then to the next menu, you can't navigate with the buttons. You now need to use the buttons. So do you understand how stupid that is, Manba 1, that I need to use this button, but then I can't select it. I need to go like, oh, she's getting away from me again. You guys are experiencing this with me. We're gonna figure this out together. It's stupid. I understand that. You understand it as well. And even the way this is labeled is kind of confusing. It says single right here, single over here, multiple over here. This is gonna be your macro buttons. We're the single press gang over here. It should be so much easier to get bound and up and running. Now joystick over here, I do like that it is separated from the left and right analog stick, and you do have 4 modes, which is the most linear. Then you have immediate, which ramps up as soon as you press the thumbstick. Your speeds are just through the roof. Delay is the opposite, to where it's a little bit slow at first and then ramps up your sensitivity. And then high performance, which installs a turbocharger and a bottle of NOS in the trunk. Leave it in default because it is linear, which is preferred amongst GamerHeaven subscribers. And then in vibration, you can of course adjust the vibration, which is all linked up. It's just the 2 palm motors. There is no 2 motors in the triggers, and these palms are pretty weak. It's cool you can see the motors spinning in there, but I've tested a lot of controllers recently that have surprised the shit out of me. I've tested the vibration. Whoa! Rattling my bones loose in my hand. This is weak sauce over here. It's not haptics. You can see it's actual rumble force motors, the old schools. So not haptic modules, which can provide a lot more accurate, several different types of effects, but also higher peak strength. These don't have that. And at the bottom, you do have the screen/LED brightness and color, as well as the control for your RGB. I expected a lot more control here, being able to dim the brightness or different modes, fading through the spectrum. You don't really have any of that. You have fading, breathing mode, basically. And then a static color, which are these colors here. I'm gonna select teal because that goes hard in the paint. Yeah, I'd expected a little bit more customization and control of the RGB lights, but you know. As for the Manba 1, it's got back buttons for gamers that don't like back buttons. They are small, difficult to hit, so you're at no risk of accidentally hitting them. Granted, you can disable them on virtually any controller with rear buttons or back paddles, unless you get static buttons in the builder, which for God's sake, why would you do that to yourself? And I'm also asking Manba 1 why they would do this to themselves. With the ball of my middle finger, I am able to hit these bottom 2 where I naturally rest my hands. I have medium to larger size hands, I guess. I'm 5'11". This is what I'm rocking. I wouldn't say I have larger hands. It's like medium. I do like that they are virtually silent and give you a nice little tactile click, although a little bit lighter of a tactile bump on your finger than I would like. So if you are using a headset, blaring your surround sound or something, you're really relying on feeling button presses. Let me get down low here. They're really small, which makes them kind of a chore to hit, but these ones up top are completely useless because if I roll my finger upwards, that was a really drastic exaggeration of it. I should just be able to Okay, there we go. Now I can, but very rarely am I able to hit these little buttons in gameplay when I'm actually needing them. They're not there for me. And you can bind these on the fly, but you need to dig through the screen, which as you saw over there is not the most fluid, smooth, user-friendly experience. And even things like adjusting the vibration, yeah, it's cool to see that visual representation. Oh, I'm on mode 3 of 4, but you can easily just hold down this button and up and down on the D-pad to adjust the vibration motors. Tons of other controllers do that don't have a big screen right here, and because of that could have a start and select button right here. These rear buttons exist, and there are 4 of them, which that's great to see. That is fantastic, but they're small. The rebinding process while on the fly, not needing a nap or anything, isn't the best. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 5 out of 10. A 5 out of the 10, right down the middle. As far as battery life is concerned, it does show that there's an 1800 milliamp hour on board on the manufacturer's listing as well as the Amazon page. However, official runtime and charge time is not listed, and upon a Google search, you're going to see a lot of varied information out there saying this controller is going to get anywhere between 8 and 12 hours of gameplay. Having fully charged this controller initially when I received it, I have not been able to kill it yet, and I have put about 10 hours in, so I can deem the 8 hours to not be valid, although that was with the RGB completely turned off, which we know does make a big difference. So that most likely is where you're getting between 8 to 12 hours with RGB on and off respectively. And as for charge time, it was showing my battery was at about 50% when I received it and took about another hour to get it to 100%, although the interwebs are showing 1 to 2 hours of charging to get it fully juiced, which is pretty fast charging.
Around here, the pants don't sag and the controllers don't lag. Let's run a fucking speed test, shall we?
Select the number of tests. 2000 samples is fine. That'll be plenty of data for me. Go ahead and rotate the left analog stick and don't stop once you start. Wow, it's kind of slow, eh? We're bouncing around a lot too. I'd say between 4 and 8 milliseconds on a 125 hertz stalker clocker. So we're in that weird middle point, which I've talked about previously, where generally the polling rates land at 125, 250, 500, and 1000 for these concurrent amounts of input lag or delay. And this goes all the way back to mice. That was the first gaming peripheral where measuring input delay was a thing, and then it converted over to the controller world. However, there are now so many programs on PC that are designed specifically for controllers, for gamepads, and I do a lot of tutorials and walkthroughs about them. I'll be doing a lot more in the near future, such as DS4 and ReWAS. Make sure you subscribe for that. If this was at a higher stability than 65%, we would be seeing a more accurate reading here, which would be around 125 hertz for 8 milliseconds, but we are in that 6 millisecond range. I want to see what X input test has to say on the topic. Let's bring him in here for a minute. Stalled it, and balled it. 8 milliseconds. Also, I just saw a little, whoa, you see him there popping up there? 125 hertz jitter. That's high, and that is partially due to these outliers. And when I was rotating on those thumbsticks, you saw these sporadic numbers popping up. Little stutters of inconsistency, spikes of huge delay. I don't need to tell you, you don't want that, especially when going wired. Controller's still on in the back. I'm going to plug the dongle in, and it should automatically just jump back into X input mode in a perfect world. That's how it'll go down.
In order to get up and running with the dongle, there's a couple of steps, which really sucks because that's fine with Bluetooth, having to press a certain combination of buttons, but a dongle should always be plug and play. That simple, where you just plug it in, turn on the controller, and it's good to go. But what you need to do, hold down the home button for 3 seconds, and then on the screen, select mode, PC, and then go back to pair over here and pair up, and you should, upon success, of course, having the dongle plugged in. That was step 1, you know. There we go. We're good to go. Getting the input lag or delay of the dongle. Holy bejeez. Is this real life? So it's averaging out to 8 on 125 hertz clock, which isn't terrible. It's not great for a dongle because there are dongles that have 4 and even 2 milliseconds right out of the box. But bigger cause for concern here is all these outliers and a bunch of inconsistency. The minimum, maximum, very far from each other, jitter, high as shit, and also just scrolling through the numbers manually, you can see that the numbers are all over the place. Frightening. Bluetooth is handled a little bit differently on this controller. Once you're paired up to your PC, you're going to hold down the back and start buttons together for 5 seconds. And I was hoping it would pop up and let you scroll and select what mode of connectivity, but you actually have to just hold down for 5 seconds, and you will see in the top left, sorry for hitting the mic, in the top left, now it says PCS, that's switch input. There's the default of X input, which has been the golden standard on PC for a long time. And then if you're playing some older games, maybe some retro emulation, you have D input in there as well. And in theory, according to the instruction manual, you can access all 3 of those modes in Bluetooth, dongle, and wired. But unfortunately, all 3 modes of connectivity aren't being discovered by my Bluetooth motherboard on my PC. I wanted to test the speeds for you guys. I'm not able to currently, which is fine because that's generally the mode of connectivity I recommend the least for consistency and peak speeds, that being Bluetooth. Over here in the Lord of Mass overclocking software, we do have our Xbox 360 controller not overclocked, stock clock for around 4 to 8 milliseconds of input lag or delay. Let's go ahead and do our thing on it. And I do plan on doing an updated overclocking guide, as that is about 2 years old now. And there have been updates to the program that we use, and some other things have changed, so update time. It is now overclocked, 1000 hertz for around 1 millisecond of input lag. Let's test. Holy shit, yeah, baby. Oh yeah, yes, you're gonna wanna overclock, because now we're around 5 milliseconds as opposed to that 7 or 8. Damn, I started really slow.
So there definitely is a small benefit to overclocking. Consistency still all over the place, but it did lower the speeds about 1.5 milliseconds, so that's good. Connected with the dongle once again, it is already being reflected as overclocked, even though we only overclocked via the USB-C cable. So let's run a poll and see if there's any benefit to overclocking the dongle. That is a negative. Unlike going wired and overclocking, which does shave about 1.5 milliseconds off, there is no benefit to overclocking the dongle. And Bluetooth I couldn't pair to my PC, so I can't overclock and test that method. As for converter or adapter support, on the Xbox Series S and X, you are able to plug the dongle into the USB port of a converter or adapter like the XB2 and play wired or wireless with the 2.4 gigahertz dongle. Although with the dongle, I had a couple of weird hitches in my movement where I'd be looking around and then my movement would stutter or just wouldn't be registered for a second. Super weird. And I couldn't get any of the 3 modes of Bluetooth to connect to the dongle, that being Android, iOS, and Switch, which are all the same Bluetooth card, by the way. And on the PS5 side of the house, it threw the controller into the weirdest boot loop where it would continually turn the controller off, restarting it before I could do anything with it. So I couldn't even play PS4 games on the PS5, which was sad. As for the pros, cons, and verdict, I'm going to go ahead and start with the cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement as I suck down a little Mocha Joe real quick, wet my whistle, wet my beak. Followed up with one of these too. Double doozy, the 1-2 punch, if you will. Hot and then cold. It was actually cold and then cold because that coffee's been sitting out for hours. Okay, the cons. A couple of big in-your-face features that are really stupid and could have been foregone, completely ditched. And those build costs allocated towards components that people would have noticed that you're constantly touching, like the face buttons, the rear buttons, the bumpers and triggers. That being the removable faceplate, it's understandable if you have a removable faceplate if that's the way to swap the thumbsticks, because it takes out the whole thumbstick cap, base and all. Since these don't, it's just the actual stem/shaft, whatever you like to call it. I like shaft, that sounds fun. By tugging on the shaft here, boop, it just pops right out, held on by friction. So you don't need to have this little swappable clear faceplate. Looks cool, but unless you're gonna spray paint it or something, there's no real point to it. The screen, big old fat 2-inch screen, actually gets pretty bright, very impressive. Doesn't matter if it's an OLED or not. Kind of dumb, because everything that this does, all the control could be done on the board. We see it with cheap little $30, $40 Amazon controllers all the time, where you hold down a mode button and then the D-pad, and it makes the lights go brighter or dimmer, or turns the vibration up or down. So the screen is kind of a nicety, but I would deem it a gimmicky feature at the end of the day. And you could say the same thing with the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, but that screen has third-party app support where you can check social media, which I think is really stupid. I pointed that out during my initial review. Like, do you really want to be getting social alerts of how many updates you have on your last post while you're trying to play a game? I know, it's silly. But some really functional alerts from things like security systems can be used on that screen. But it's just selecting 4 presets as where you could really tweak and fine-tune. You even had all 4 of the vibration motors to control on the TB Stealth. And even that, I mean, they could have gotten away easily without having the screen, but I think the feature was cool and actually useful. As we're here, it's cool, but it's not really useful, to be honest. Speaking of not really useful, but cool, I guess, is the back buttons, the rear inputs. It's great that there are 4 of them, and with a modified grip, you can use all 4 of them. They're serviceable, but definitely not great. They're small, the top 2 are very difficult to hit, and in order to rebind them, you do need to dig through a couple of menus on the screen. There's no 3.5 millimeter headphone on the bottom, not a big deal for me, but what is a big fucking deal for anyone that's gonna hold this controller, any gamer with hands, is that huge metallic panel or plate on the bottom, which serves no purpose other than to fumble up the ergonomics or comfort because your hands are constantly rubbing against it. The D-pad can be great if you prefer one where you put your finger in the middle and just wiggle it around in every direction. I don't like those. I like to actually have to press each direction, where it slips into each gate with a positive click, like a shifter in a sports car. Okay, it's a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean. Distinct gates where you know, oh yep, I just hit up left or down right. Face buttons, the noise that I just made there, sums it all up. Just go back to the face button section if you'd like to hear my thoughts on that. Same thing with the bumpers and triggers. They all feel very cheap, and that adds to the build quality summary, which was that it feels like a toy, and it definitely does. The trigger lock system is the most difficult to engage. It has like a child safety lock system where you have to press it in and then down. It's so weird. Not much travel on the triggers for you racing game fans, although they are Hall effect. That counts for something. Not nearly as much as a selling factor as the magnetic Hall effect thumbsticks, which are a pro as we jump right into the pro, or this is the good things that this controller does section. The thumbsticks, they performed fantastic. They felt great, and the 2 included swappable options are good to the point where I wouldn't even use KontrolFreeks. I'm just going to run it like this. Cosmetically, I think this looks really sick. If you go with the white version, which why the hell would you not? The black version's the same same price and doesn't have the clear faceplate where you can see the vibration motors. The RGB, I think, was implemented in a really cool way. Granted, it's very limited in the software, which I say software, it's just the control on the screen itself. But I thought there'd be more modes or you'd be able to dim it. No, not really. You can just turn it off or go through a couple of preset modes. It's very limited, but it looks really cool. It is a pro. So putting it all together with the verdict, we got the cons, we got the pros. They're all going to hang out here in the middle. I was really surprised with the inconsistency wired and definitely wireless. The dongle, pretty sporadic, and also I had a hell of a time, as in I couldn't connect at all to the PlayStation or with Bluetooth to the Xbox. We're talking about converter support right now, and switching between modes on the PC takes a long time too, because you have to hold these two buttons together to switch between D, X, or Bluetooth mode, and that takes quite a while. Same thing with Bluetooth. I couldn't even connect at all. Not that Bluetooth would be my desired means of connectivity out of wired 2.4G dongle and Bluetooth. It'd be bottom of the totem pole, but I should be able to use the Bluetooth card on board for sure. I guess because the expectations in my noggin were so high, because it had been recommended to review by so many people, although granted a lot of those were just like, hey, I haven't pulled the trigger on buying this thing yet, would like to get your thoughts, Stallion. Here are my thoughts. It's a little lackluster McNutbuster over here. I mean, it feels like a toy, which a lot of $70 controllers don't. There's $60, $70 controllers that feel premium as shit in hand. This is uncomfortable because of this. You can see it from here, this lip, this chin. Why is it there? I forgot about this in the pros, but this is a huge one. It's $70 and includes a charger cradle. That's pretty cool. Having said that, the battery life is not great. If you turn off the RGB, you're getting like 12 hours. With the RGB on, you're getting about 8, which isn't great. But at the end of the day, you have to look at its competitors and what you can get in the Switch/PC market for $70. And there's a lot. That is a huge segment. There's so many controllers, so many pro controllers in that segmenty that, let me just give you a couple of options that I would pick up. I would personally prefer over the Manba one. We've talked about what I like, what I don't like. The Fly Digivator 3 Pro is now pretty much going consistently for $80 on Amazon, where it used to be $90 when it was released, and that's a really good controller. You want to save a little bit of money, the GameSir wireless pads, like the Cyclone, or shoot, even more money, the Novas, Hall Effect $35 controllers, the Nova, or you don't mind going wired, of course, the G7 and 7 SE, those are great. Well, those are Xbox, not Switch, but a lot of you guys watching are going to use this on PC regardless, so many options, and this is one that looks cool, the screen's kind of neat, but it just really, there's better options in my eyes, my gooped up corneas. Drop in the comment section below what you think of this controller. It is linked in the description below if you'd like to check it out, and I'm glad that I reviewed it because it is an interesting controller, and I'm glad that I finally got around to reviewing it. Speaking of around to reviewing it, there's a ton of gamepads lined up to get their day in court. See you tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more stallions and stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better. So mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.